So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So yesterday our learning objective was that we were going to review our order of operations from our previous year, and then we were going to do some basic order of operation problems just so we could get back in the hang of using our order of operations. And I told you that throughout the week we were going to incorporate more of those rational numbers that we were doing in that first unit we just finished. So today we're going to continue with our order of operations, and we're going to incorporate decimals into the order of operations that we do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our activator. So I just want you to think about this, and then at the end we're going to come back to it, and we're going to use what we worked on today to solve this idea. So this is one of the things I hear with math is that I hear a lot, well, when are we ever going to use it? This is actually a real situation that I had. So I wanted to make slime for my boys, and I have 2 boys. So the recipe called for 1/2 ounce of glue, 1.5 ounces of water, and 1.5 ounces of borax. I just use these numbers to make them decimals. The situation is real. This recipe is not, so I'm not sure how your slime would turn out if you use this recipe that I've got. So that's my deal. This is the recipe that I want to use. I want to triple the recipe so that I have a whole lot of slime. But after I triple the recipe and make my slime, I have to split the slime in half between my 2 boys. So that's our example. We have all these different ounces of glue, water, and borax to make our slime. I'm going to triple that recipe, but I'm going to split my grand total between my 2 boys. So we're going to think about how we would do that, and then we're going to come back to that at the end. So now I want to go ahead, and I'm going to review, and I'm just going to breeze through these because that was our big task for yesterday, was to go back through our order of operations. So I'm going to review real quick through our PEMDAS. So our PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally's loud radio. So I know with parentheses, please, or P for our parentheses, or our P in our P for please, or our P in PEMDAS is going to stand for parentheses. Let me try that again. Parentheses. And then our grouping symbols, our E is going to stand for our exponents. So our please excuse, E for exponents. All right, my M and my D are together, and we went over this yesterday because M is for our multiplication, and D is for, D is for division. They are next to each other like that because we know that when we have multiplication and division, we're going to do those from left to right. And then the same with addition and subtraction. Those two, we are going to do addition and subtraction, S-U-B-T. We're going to do those as well from left to right. So our please, parentheses, excuse, exponents, my dear, multiplication and division, Aunt Sally, addition and subtraction, and that loud radio was that for our left to right with our multiplication and division, and left to right with our addition and subtraction. So let's go ahead. Let's work through some examples. This should all be the same as yesterday. The only difference is that we're going to incorporate our rules for addition. We're going to use these order of operations. We're going to incorporate the rules we know for decimals. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by writing this out bigger so I have more room to work it out. So I have, if I could turn my pen on and it would work. Let's try that again. I have 0.7, and I have that plus parentheses, and in this case, this parentheses is just to tell us this 8.8 is negative, divided by 2.2 times big parentheses, negative 8.7 squared minus 8.8 8.7 squared. Close parentheses. All right. So, and I'm going to down here, I'm going to write PEMDAS so that we don't forget it. And I'll cross out our letters as we go. Oops. Let's just try this. There we go. And cross out our letters as we go. All right. So my first letter in PEMDAS is P. So I'm going to ignore that negative 8.8 because those parentheses are just telling me that that 8.8 is negative. So I'm going to look at these parentheses. And remember, I told you yesterday that within our parentheses, our order of operations is still in effect. So we would follow order of operations within our parentheses to determine what we would do. So I see subtraction and I see exponents in those parentheses. And I know that exponents come before subtraction. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to square my 8.7. And I want to kind of star this. So look, I have a negative 8.7 that I'm squaring, and I have a positive 8.7 that I'm squaring. So I want to go ahead and point this out because this is going to be a callback to last chapter. We remember that when we have two negatives, they're going to multiply to give you a positive. And that when we have two positives, they're going to multiply to give you a positive. So because we're doing a negative times a negative, because times itself, they're both going to be negative. And here, a positive times a positive, because two positives give us a positive. We know that when I multiply this out, I'm going to get the same thing because they both within themselves have the same sign. So let's go ahead and multiply that out. I know that 7 times 7 gives me 49. 7 times 8 gives me 56, plus the 4 we carried is 60. On my second row, I'm going to put a 0, so I know that I'm starting in that second column. So then I know that 8 times 7 is going to give me 56. I'm going to cross out that 4, and we're going to carry our 5. 8 times 8 gives me 64, plus that 5 we carried is 69. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add straight down. What we were doing is multiplying. I should have wrote that. So we know 9 and 0 is going to give me 9. 0 and 6 is going to give me 0. 6 and 9 is going to give me 15. Carry that 1. And 1 and 6 is going to give me 7. So now this is another part where we have to think back to last chapter when we were multiplying decimals. And even last year we learned this, that when we are multiplying decimals, we have to start and end with the same amount of decimals. And this is where I want to point out, this is the biggest mistake I see. A lot of you want to tell me that I have one decimal here and one decimal here, and because they both only have one decimal, I should end with one decimal, and that is not the case. When we are starting and ending with the same amount, we have to incorporate all of the decimals we started with. So I have 1 in that first 8.7, and I have 1 in that second 8.7, which gives me a grand total of 2 decimals starting with. So I have to start, because I started with 2 decimals, I have to end with 2 decimals. So my decimal is going to go there in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish out this parentheses. And I know that we said negative and a negative is going to give me a positive. So this is going to be 75.69. I'll bring down that minus. And then again, we said that that positive is going to be the same answer because 2 positives and 2 negatives both give me a positive. So minus again on the 75.69. We're going to close our parentheses, and then we are going to transfer everything down. Doing one step at a time so we don't forget anything. Divide 22.2 times that parentheses. All right, so 75.69 minus 75.69, we're going to finish out the parentheses, is something minus itself is going to give us 0. So now bring down one more time. I have 0.7 plus, and I lost my negative sign, so make sure we don't lose it, negative 8.8, because that was the whole point of these parentheses, is that we don't lose that negative sign. Divide 2.2 times 0. All right, so now I have division and multiplication. This is where this multiplication and division, that loud radio, or where we put them right side up to know multiplication is next to division, I'm going to go from left to right with that. So I'm going to say 8.8 divided by 2.2. So we're going to do this first because I have addition, I have division, and I have multiplication. So I know multiplication and division come before addition. So I have 8.8 divided by 2.2, and I'm going to go ahead and erase my work for that square root. So I know that when I'm dividing decimals, this is what we did last chapter, the first one is the most important. So 8.8 is going to go in the house, or VIP comes first, so they go in the house, out of the rain. So I know that we talked about before we can divide, we have to make sure that number outside of the house has no decimals. So I have to move the decimal 1 to the right, and we said what we do to that one on outside, I have to additionally do to the one on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to move up my decimal. Well, how do I get from 22 to 88? I can recognize that if I multiply both those 2's by a 4, I'm going to get 88. So I'm going to leave that as a 4. Now look back. I have a negative 8.8 and a positive 2.2. We said that when I have one positive and one negative, our answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to bring everything down. Bring down my 0.7. We're going to say plus. We just did that division. Negative 4. Negative 4. Divided, we did our division, times, bring down our 0. Now we're going to do our multiplication. So we have 4, anything times 0, we have negative 4 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So we're going to bring down 0.7 times 0. Oh, sorry. I copied that wrong. This is addition, not multiplication. So we multiplied these to get our 0, and we're going to bring down addition and not multiplication. And 0.7 plus 0, anything plus 0 is itself. So we left with 0.7. So we're still doing the same thing. We're following our order of operations. And we're following our negative and positive, our integer rules. And the only thing we were adding in there was that this time the numbers we are using we're gonna have to use what we know about decimals. So we got 0.7. And then I have one more example, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're going to get back to our slime activity and incorporate that into our learning objective, because our learning objective was that we were going to use those order of operations. Excuse me. We're going to use those order of operations, and we're going to go ahead and add in those decimals so that we know our decimal rules we used in last chapter, and we're going to go ahead and use those in our order of operations. So I'm going to write this real big so that I have plenty of room. I have 5.7 minus negative 7.1 squared plus negative 1.6 squared times double parentheses. So if you wanted to go ahead and make the outer parentheses a bracket, and then we have negative 5.5, and I made that outer one a bracket just to avoid any confusion when I have the two parentheses together. So minus negative, and let's not lose our negative sign, 0.2 parentheses, and close it with the bracket. All right, so let's go again. We're going to write our PEMDAS down here. My first step is to look at my parentheses. So now I'm looking at negative 5.5 divided by negative 0.2. So that 5.5 is going to go on the in the house because it comes first. And I'm going to go ahead and ignore my signs until we're done with division like we did last chapter. 0, 2. We know our first step before we can divide with those decimals is to go ahead, make sure on the outside we have no digits behind the decimal. So we're going to move that one to the right. And what I do to the inside, I also have to, or what I do to the outside, that 0.2, I have to do to the outside. So now I have 2 into 55. And I know 2 goes into 5, and I'm going to bring my decimal up here so I don't forget. 2 goes in 5 2 times, which is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. We're going to bring down that 5. 2 goes into 15 7 times, which is 14. And 1 left over. And we're going to, after our decimal, annex 0, bring down a 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So we're left with 27.5. So we're going to go ahead and copy everything down with that one step we did. So 5.7 minus negative 7.1 squared plus negative 1.6 squared times, and we already said when we did our division, 27.5. My last step that I did not point out, we ignored our signs until the end. We had a negative and a negative. So when I have a negative or a negative, think now, 2 negatives, does that give me a positive or a negative? Gives me a positive. So I do not need to put a sign there. It's a positive 27.5. All right, so we've done our parentheses. My next step is to do my exponents, and I'm going to do these one at a time. So my first exponent I have is a 7.1 squared. We know squared means times itself, so 7.1 times 2. And one of the things I heard in my small group that I had to remind us is that 7.1 squared is not that base times the exponent. It is times itself, however many times that exponent is. So we're going to say 7.1 times 7.1 and not times 2. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. Second row, we're going to put a 0, so we know that we're starting in the second column. And then 7 times 1 is 7, and 7 times 7 is 49. And then we're going to add straight down. 1 and 0 is 1. 7 and 7 is 14. 1 and 9 is 10. And 1 and 4 is 5. And then our last step is to go ahead and count our grand total of decimals that we started with. So I have 1 in the first one and 1 in the second one. Again, that does not mean we started with 1 in each. So we should end with 1. Means I started with 1 and 1. So I started with a grand total of 2. So I should end with 2 behind the decimal. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy that down with our one step. And then I believe we have another exponent before we move on to the next part of PEMDAS. So I have 5.7 minus, and then it was a negative. Remember, 2 negatives make a positive. So that 7.1 squared was going to leave us with a positive 50.41. 50 and 41 hundredths plus negative 1.6 squared times 27.5. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give you a second. So go ahead, pause that, write down that word. I'm going to erase it. All right. So as we're going, and I'm going to move my PEMDAS down further. So move my PEMDAS down here. We just keep going, bring down another step. So now we have another squared, negative 1.6 squared. And again, we know a negative and a negative, our answer is going to be positive. So 6 times 6 gives me 36 because squared times itself and not times 2. So 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 1 is 6 plus the 3 we carried is 9. So in our second row, we're going to add a 0 to know that we're starting in that second column. 1 times 6 is 6. And 1 times 1 is 1. Then we're going to go ahead and add straight down. 6 and 0 is 6. 9 and 6 is 15. and 1 is 2. And again, one more time. So our last two steps when we're doing that is our signs and our decimals. We know 2 negatives make a positive, so it's going to be a positive. And then our last step is that I started with 1 in decimal in the front, in the top one, and 1 in the second one. So instead of I started both of them with 1, I have 1 and 1 for a grand total of starting with 2 behind the decimal. So it's going to go here, 2.56. So we're going to bring that down, 5.7 minus 50.41 plus 2.56, 2.56, and then times 27.5. All right. And so PEMDAS, we've done all of our exponents now. Let's go ahead, move on to our multiplication and division. Well, I have 5.7 minus, then I have plus, and then I have multiplication. So our next step, subtraction, addition and multiplication. Well, multiplication and division come before addition and subtraction. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to do my multiplication. And like we did last chapter, our multiplication is the same. We line them up and ignore the decimals and ignore the signs and then worry about our signs. So, and these are both positive, so it's going to be a positive. 27 plus times 256, and we're going to ignore the decimals until the end. 5 and 6 multiplied give me 30, so carry the 3, 0. 6 times 7 is 42, plus the 3 we carried is 45. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 plus the 4 is 16. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to make some more room. Second row, we're going to start with a 0 so that we know we're in the second column. Cross these out to know that we're starting over. 5 and 5 is 25, so carry the 2 and 5. 5 times 7 is 35, plus the 2 we carried is 37, so 3, 7. 5 times 2 is 10, plus the 3 we carried is 13. I don't know why I'm trying to draw my line. I still have a 2 left. Whoops. So third row, 2 zeros so that we know we're in that third column. Cross out any of our borrowing. We know 2 and 5 is 10, so 0. Carry our 1. 2 and 7 is 14, plus the 1 we carried is 15. So 5, carry the 1. 2 and 2 is 4, plus the 1 we carried is 5. We're going to go ahead and add straight down. 0, 0, and 0 give me 0. 5 and 5 give me 10. Carry our 1. 6 and 7 give me 13, plus the 1 give me 14. 5 and 3 give me 8, plus 1 give me 9, plus the 1 we we carried is 10. Borrow or carry one more time. 5 and 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. All right, last step. We need to total up how many behind the decimal we started with. So I'm going to go ahead and I have 1 up here and 2 down here. So I have 1 and 2 give me a grand total of 3. So we have to end with 3 behind the decimal. So I have 5.7 minus 5.7 minus 50.41 plus, and our multiplication answer was 70.4 because we counted our decimals and we know they were both positive. 2 positives give me a positive. And now we have addition. We did multiplication. There was no division. Addition and subtraction. Now that I have addition and subtraction, we are just going to go from left to right. And I'm going to erase this because we know all we have left is addition and subtraction. So we know when we are adding and subtracting, and this is just a little bit of a review for everything. We've done some multiplication with the decimals, we've done some division with decimals, and here's some subtraction with decimals, because we know with our addition and subtraction, we need to make sure we line up that decimal. This is the biggest issue I saw last year. You put that decimal, you line it up. You don't put that 5.7 at the end. You line up the decimal and put in a 0 as a placeholder. So 1 and 0 give me 1. 4 and 7 give me 11. Bring down our decimal because we lined it up so we can leave it where it's at. 0 and 5 is 5, plus the 1 we carried is 6, and 5 and nothing is 5. So we have 56.11 plus 70.4. Our last step there is to go ahead and line up our decimal and add. Oh, shoot. This is where in class you all go, Miss Hildebrand, Miss Hildebrand. It was subtraction. Because Miss Hildebrand is going to go back and fix her error instead of fixing the whole video. So this is where, if you were here, you would have said, Miss Hildebrand, Miss Hildebrand. It's subtraction. And I added. Whoops. All right, so let's go ahead and try that again. We are using our addition and subtraction rules of decimals and integers now. 50.41. We have a positive and a negative. We're going to subtract and keep the bigger sign. So 50.41 minus, because it's subtraction, 5.7. And still adding our 0 to keep our, because we lined up our decimals and we need that 0 as a placeholder. 1 minus 0 is 1. You can't take 7 from 4, so we have to borrow. Can't borrow from 0, so we're going to say 9, and we're going to keep going to our neighbor to bring 4. 14 minus 7 is 7. 9 minus 5 is 4, and 4 minus nothing is also 4. So now, and try that again, 50.41 is bigger, so we're going to keep that negative sign. So, and I'm going to stay on the right tab. So we have negative 44.71 plus 70.4. And again, we have a positive and a negative. So we are going to subtract and keep the bigger sign, which is positive 70.4. So our last step is to say 70.4. Line up our decimal, 44 decimals lined all up, 7, 1. And we're subtracting and keeping the bigger positive sign because this is bigger. All right, and we put in a 0 as our placeholder. So you can't take 1 from 0, so 10, 9, borrowed, so 3. Well, we can't take 7 from 3, so we have to borrow again. You can't take nothing from 0, so 9, and borrow from their neighbor. So 13 minus 7 leaves us with 6. Bring down the decimal we lined up. 9 minus 4 leaves us with 5. 6 minus 4 leaves us with 2. So those two problems we did were a little bit longer, but they gave us a chance to look at all our different integer rules, whether we were multiplying or adding. We were multiplying or dividing, adding or subtracting. It used all our integer rules as well as all of our decimal rules. It kind of gave us a chance to look at all of them, and they were lengthy. So on your homework, these two lengthy problems will be shortened as well because that did take us some time, and it gives us practice using all of our different things. So now we're going to review what we learned. Our objective for today was to use our order of operations, which we said to review, because that was our objective. And then I'm going to jump used to this objective. This is our closure. We wanted to use our order of operation to incorporate decimals, and we knew our order of operations was our PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear, bracketing those together because those are from left to right. Aunt Sally's loud radio, and that loud radio is that with our addition and subtraction we went left to right, and our multiplication and division we went from left to right. So today we used our order of operations to incorporate decimals. We know when we are adding and subtracting with decimals, we line it up and keep it where it is. We know with division, we make sure our divisor has no decimals in it. So we move to the right however many times that takes, and however many times we do for our divisor, we have to do the same to our dividend. And then for multiplication, we need to start and end with the same amount of decimals. Those are our decimal rules, and we were able to use those today to do our order of operations. So let's use that to come back to our activator. So I want to make slime for my boys. I want the recipe. I want to triple the recipe and split the slime. Well, let's see. I know that I have to add all of these ingredients together. Mixing them together would be adding them together. Plus 1.5. This is my original recipe. I want to take that original recipe and I want to triple it. And after I triple it, so, and instead of tripling it that way, this could be done, but I'm going to show you. Either way it works because what's done in the parentheses, I'm just going to create double parentheses. I know my glue times 3 plus my water times 3 plus my borax times 3. I'm going to fit, will give me my total slime, and my last step would be to divide by 2. So 3 times 5 is 15. And I have 1 behind the decimal, so I'm going to get 1.5 plus 15 times 3 is going to give me 45. And again, 1 behind the decimal, so I need to end with 1 behind the decimal. And again, 1.5 times 3, 45, and 1 behind the decimal. So end with 1 behind the decimal. So last step, 4.5 and 4.5. We're adding all those together. So 1.5 and 4.5, let's go left to right. 1.5 and 4.5 are going to give me 6. 6 plus 4.5 is going to give me 10.5. My last step was to divide that by 2 to know how much slime was each child going to get. So 2, my 10.5 ounces of slime that we've made divided by 2 is 5. So 2, so 0. Bring down our 5. 2 goes into 5. 2 times. Bring up our decimal where it is at. That was that rule. And then 2 goes into 5. We said 2 times. 5 minus 4 is 1. And bring down 1 more 0. 2 goes into 10. 5 times. So how much slime will each of my children get? 5.25 ounces. So we used our order of operations and we incorporated decimals that was able to help us use our integer rules as well as our decimal rules. So you have, I believe it's 2, it might be 3 short problems on this on Schoology. Before that, we're going to go ahead. We have guided practice today, so please go to that. And then after that, there is an independent practice on Schoology. Please come to guided practice to answer any questions and get some practice on this. And that is all I have for you today. If I do not see you in class for our guided practice, have a great day. Go ahead and get that independent practice done. And that's it.